Hey, hi, hello, welcome back to Trail Society, produced by our friends over at Feisty Media. I'm your host, Corrine Malcolm, and today's episode is brought to you by our favorites over at Rabbit. Some housekeeping to get things kicked off. Just a reminder, we've made some small changes to the podcast in 2026. As you heard last week, you'll get to still hear from your favorite co-hosts, with Keely and Hillary joining me for an episode every single month. It's just like the Trail Society you know and love, but we've moved to a weekly podcast format. That means more interviews, more running science, and more behind-the-scenes looks into what we've got going on in the trail and ultra running community. As always, slide into our DMs with questions, guest suggestions, or anything you'd like to hear on the show. We'd love to pull those in for future episodes. And something that you might have caught at the top of the show, I mentioned Feisty Media as our producing partner. We are incredibly excited to have joined the Feisty Media family in 2026. We are officially their 6th podcast. So if you like what we do, there's a ton more incredible content for you over on their website, feisty.co. There you can subscribe to their newsletters, and I would highly suggest you go give them a follow over on Instagram at feisty_media. The podcast I might be the most excited about right now is that Feisty just relaunched their women's performance podcast. It's hosted this season by the incredible Dr. Ayala. Again, a lot of superlatives, but it's very, very good. We're actually going to have her on the podcast as a guest in February. Their first episode dropped January 12th, and it's got Trail Society podcast favorite Dr. Emily Krause as the featured guest, and they tackle the topic of gender gaps in sports performance research. It's a great deep dive on the topic. Before we dive into our interview today with Olivia Amber, we've got to give a shout out to our official apparel partner for 2026. That is the fine folks over at Rabbit. We're very excited to create more great Trail Society and Rabbit apparel for you, running scholarship opportunities and popping up at more events near you, including the newly launched Clubhouse series. Keep your eyes peeled for more information on that. For now, you can scoot on over to the runningrabbit.com website and check out their latest and greatest gear, where you can use the code TrailSocietyJan for the month of January to receive 10% off. Again, that's TrailSocietyJan, Jan, to get 10% off. It's been really chilly here in Seattle, so you'll catch me running to and from the gym and then lounging for the rest of the day in the Easy Joggers. They're incredibly comfortable. I've been pairing that with the fan favorite Outrun Mock Neck, which is a wool blend, and it's both warm while remaining incredibly lightweight. Joining me on the podcast today is someone that we've been wanting to have on the podcast for over a year now. That is Olivia Amber. Olivia is a professional runner for the North Face who most recently set the women's FKT on Norman's 13 in the High Sierra. I'm biased. I have known Olivia since she was probably 8 years old. She's a former roommate and dear friend of mine, but I'm really excited today to bring you into her world, a world that has veered off trail. Olivia makes her home in Bishop, California, and outside of professional sport, works for the Mammoth Lakes Tourism Board at Visit Mammoth. I had such a great time catching up with Olivia, and I hope that you enjoy the conversation as much as I did. Let's dive into that chat now. Olivia Amber, welcome to the pod. How are you?
Better now that I'm seeing you.
Yay! It makes me so happy to have you on the pod. It's been a long time in the making, and I am glad you are here. I'm asking everyone this year the same kickoff question, and that is, what is something you wish people knew about you? I'm going to go first. I'm the oldest sibling of 3, and I worry that if I had been the youngest, I would have become unbearably competitive and potentially a horrible person. How about you?
Ooh, I love this question. I mean, I feel like a lot of people know this about me, but not everyone. But I really just wanted to be my sister Nicolette, basically my whole life. Goal is still not achieved. I don't have a law school degree. I am still not her, but yeah, still definitely
Striving
goal.
to be Nicolette. Yeah. No, being the younger sibling, I think it's very normal to want to be your older sibling, to follow in those footsteps. So that is not that surprising. And
also, yeah, clearly similar vein to yours. So
yeah, it's like, siblings, siblings shape us into who we are. And we're going to talk about that a little bit. Having on the pod was long overdue. I think we've been talking about it for over a year now, like pre-Normans, which we're going to talk about today. But I feel like you're also not on enough podcasts. Like I was like scouring the internet, being Olivia Amber Normans, Olivia Amber podcast, nothing. It's like you disappeared for years, which is there's a reason for all that too. But and we'll talk about it. But I do think that our audience might not know who you are. And so I want them to have a little background as we set this up. And spoiler alert, I've known you since you were like 8 years old. And there's 1,000% a Facebook message thread from probably like 2008 in which you frequently refer to me as grandma in those messages. So on that note, I would love for you to tell us a little bit about the community you grew up in and the family you grew up in and how that has led to you becoming the professional runner you are now.
Well, I grew up in a very small town in northern Wisconsin called Lake Nebagaman, the village of Lake Nebagaman, which is actually very close to you, Corinne. And so I grew up in a very cross-country ski-driven culture. It was very close to the Berkey Trail, so I spent a lot of my time cross-country skiing and got super into that sport. And just, with the long winters, spent a ton of time outside training for that, and just also got to know that community really well. And that was a huge part of what drove me for my early years, is just trying to become the best cross-country ski racer I could be. And largely was influenced by you, Grandma, and my older sister, Nicolette. Two really big inspirations to me growing up. I would just try to keep up with you guys, and it was like the hardest thing ever. And I still think to this day is the hardest thing ever. So there's the motivation right there. Still trying to keep up with you.
We spent a lot of time. I have been carting Olivia and her older sister Nicolette around since they were, probably pre-middle school, effectively. Or my mom would like drop me off to go ski with you guys, type of thing. And then your mom would pick us up and like feed us tasty soup and whatnot. Very wholesome, very Midwest. And I guess I'm also thinking about just like your family is athletic. Like we were talking about how like your marathon PR is probably like in utero as your mom was a runner. Like,
Yep.
I just think it's like, tell us a little bit about your parents too, because your parents are incredible humans. And I think have been, are still a huge part of your life as well.
Yes. So my dad was a collegiate wrestler. My mom was a collegiate runner. There was a time, I think, like way back, because she was actually right as they were shifting like to Title IX. She couldn't actually race in high school until her sophomore year on a women's team, or something like that. Hopefully I'm getting that right. But basically she was early in like the women's sports scene, and she was like holding some records at the time for like her, I think it was like regional, like mile, stuff like that. And so running's kind of in my blood in that capacity. And so growing up, she just continued to run every morning, basically. And I would beg her to go. And of course, that was also like her time. So she would let me to a certain extent, but then be like, okay, let me actually go run now. But yeah, growing up in such a small town, family and just all being together was just a really big thing. And so we did a lot as a family. And so what my parents did, I wanted to do because I wanted to spend time with people. And they were always down to go adventure and take us outside. And we spent the summers, since they were both school teachers, we had the summers together. And so they would take us to the mountains and go climb and hike and backpack and run. And so I grew to be really passionate about just being outside. And I also had so much exposure to mountains at a young age, even though I didn't grow up. I did not grow up in the mountains. I just really always wanted to be there. And so every time we would leave, I'd get really sad. Like, why don't we just live here? Why do we have to go back to a flatter place? But yeah, their motivation around just like being active and being outdoors, and my mom specifically with the running, just like grew a really big passion for myself. And my parents, being who they are, just never really pushed it. They just wanted me and my sister to enjoy it. And so I never felt like I had to either. I just kind of could play around. And so I think that play aspect is what really kind of still drives me today. And I feel like I can thank my parents a lot for instilling that.
Yeah, your parents are super cool and they're still getting out there and getting after it. And it's incredibly inspiring. We grew up in a group of Nordic skiers that, we were part of the junior national, junior Olympic pipeline. I found a photo on my computer from Anchorage JOs of like Jesse Diggins and I with these like Alaskan yo-yos. It's a whole vibe. We grew up with some pretty impressive skiers and we raced at a very high level. I went out to Montana State to ski. Your sister went off to Middlebury. You then also make it to the East Coast to Colby to go ski. So tell us a little bit about, leaving home and going out east and skiing being a big part of your collegiate experience.
Yeah, so this is actually a great segue into how we kicked this off. I wanted to be my sister. She went to the East Coast, so I did too. Like legitimately, that was a lot of the motivation for me at the time. But in addition to that, when I was looking at all the schools, one thing that I really, really, really wanted to find for a 4-year home was a coach that I felt like really understood me as an athlete and what drove me. And I found that in Tracy Cody, who is the college ski coach, the head ski coach for Colby Nordic. She is incredible. And yeah, I am so grateful for her. But she honestly was one of the huge reasons I decided to go to Colby over the other schools I looked at. I really liked her whole philosophy. I felt like she really understood me as an athlete. And also, I just really liked the team dynamic. There is like a pretty big range, especially for like D1 NCAA skiing on the East Coast. She really cultivated a cool development pipeline through her resources in a way that I felt like as a person, I don't literally feel like a very exclusive person. I like to just get out and be with people. And so instead of it feeling like this, like there's only going to be a couple of people and we have to be the best, it was like, you can be whatever you want to be as a cross country ski racer at Colby, and I'll support that, was her sort of stance. And that resonated with me so much. And because of that, I just felt like there was no pressure to like have to be the best. Instead, it could be about what I felt like really resonated with me, which was just loving the sport and loving my team and the people around it.
I think that's super interesting because you would assume that most people, they go to this like pressure cooker environment, right? They're going to like U of U or they're going to CU and they're going to Dartmouth, like the big three. They're going to Northern Michigan and they are like going to be the dozen eggs that gets thrown against the wall and they're not going to break and they're going to become the next best thing. They're going to go to the World Cup, blah, blah, blah. They're going to ski post collegiately. They burn out. They no longer ski ever again. That doesn't happen to you. You go to this program that is like wholesome and holistic, and you get to excel in your own way. And you do, like you're an NCAA All-American, you skied really, really well. And you have the opportunity to ski post-collegiately. And for those who are unaware, in the US, you don't, and really in Europe, you don't make a ton of money as a professional skier, but there are these like post-collegiate programs that kind of allow you to put off real life a little bit and have support in order to pursue World Cup teams, World Championship teams, Olympic teams. You don't do that. You like move to San Francisco and start working your butt off and like pay off your student loans, and you like skiing's in the rear view. Like you effectively retire. And I just think that's crazy and interesting because our peers, our contemporaries are like gearing up for Cortina. People we raced against, people we beat, who are our teammates, people who we grew up with, like they're all getting ready to go to their first games, their second games, their fourth games, whatever. We're not. I think we're both very happy. We're both very happy about that. But like, just reflect on that a little bit. Like you could have, like you had offers to pursue skiing post-collegiately and you're like, yeah, no, I think I'm going to go live in the Bay Area and like,
Not
get a big girl job in tech and like become a boss, basically.
Yeah, it was I have to say, at the time, it felt like an impossible decision, but I really leaned into, and I have no idea who gave me this advice or where it came from, but it definitely didn't come from me. This obviously exists in other spaces, but the philosophy of just whatever decision you make, you have the power to make it the right decision. That was my philosophy. And so I was really struggling with, there was a part of me that just wasn't sure if I wanted to go all in with skiing. I felt a lot of stress around it, just with the financial component and, the at the time it felt like if I wasn't willing to just fully commit to the ultimate goal for that sport, which is the Olympics, what is my why? And I didn't really have a good answer for myself. And so I looked into other opportunities of what I could do with my life because I had really focused for most of my life up to that point, to be the best cross country skier I could be, as well as good of a student as I could be. But I didn't really have much exposure into a lot of other things. That's why I also studied geology. I was like, I spend a lot of time with the earth and outside, so I'm going to study that. And somehow, through friends and connections and network I made at Colby, I had some exposure to more of like that business world, which was really intriguing. And I kind of just went with that. And I was curious about what kind of person I could become, what kind of things I could learn if I were to take a different path outside of skiing. Because it was feeling, I don't know, my gut at the time was just telling me there was just something not quite right, even though it's the thing I loved the most in the entire world, aside of my family and friends, of course. But like that was the thing that really drove me for my whole life up to that point. And so I tried to just figure out what parts of myself I was curious about exploring. And one of those things was working in a more corporate setting. That was not something I have any exposure to at the time. And so I was curious about it and I started pursuing that and ended up moving to San Francisco and kind of taking the opposite path in some ways. There's no snow in San Francisco. And so I was pretty freaked out. I was like, dang, I'm going from this being my entire life to it being something that maybe I'll get to do a couple times a year at best. And honestly, like those first couple of years, I basically didn't do it because I was so busy with work and just trying to figure out my place in such a new place. I experienced a lot of growth in that time, which was really cool. Like, what other things can I do with my time if I'm not skiing? And that's when I started running a lot.
You sure did. And I remember seeing you from afar training for stuff. And I was like, has anyone told her she doesn't have to run a 50K in training to like run a 50K in a race? Enter us, our lives recolliding and becoming roommates. There's a lot of spoiler alerts in this podcast, but I just think it was like interesting and brave and a really cool pivot. And you grew a lot and you flexed a bunch of new skills and found, I don't know, like, found a new home and a new way of being. But obviously being outside was still a thing. And you were probably an unusual Uber employee in which, you would go for a trail run and then catch an Uber to work. And then you just put on pants over, your dirty running legs. Probably poison oak riddled.
Poison oak, baby. Yeah. Man, that was bad.
So bad. I'm so glad both of us are further away from poison oak now. But the bane of our existence. I did see someone roller skiing this morning, by the way.
What?
Yeah, around Green
Are they
Lake in
okay?
Seattle. I yelled "Hiya, hiya," and he ignored me. So he's not a G,
Yeah, not a G.
Not a G. I'm curious though that like running becomes this thing. Obviously, that's in your intro that you did not hear because I've not recorded it yet. You are a professional runner for the North Face, so you did flex your endurance capabilities and talents into professional running. I'm curious a little bit just about finding that within yourself, like a totally different career pivot in that regard before an even bigger career pivot. Obviously, you don't live in San Francisco anymore. You now live in Bishop. What were those like initial kind of like discovering running vibes? Obviously, I saw you pre and post first ever 50 mile, so I have insider trading knowledge as to how good and bad it can be. But for you, how was that being a thing? Because it's being an athlete's been your identity basically your entire life, or a huge part of your identity. And in a way, you retired from skiing, but running, being an athlete is still a core tenet of your identity.
Yeah, honestly, I think the endurance component like why, basically to answer why I want to run as long as I do. Is that kind of the question?
Yeah, like how has this identity evolved, right? Like
Yeah.
no longer skier, now runner, but still there's this athletic identity that's very, very important to your life and your happiness and your well-being.
Yeah. I feel like because the something that grounded me the most as a kid was just being outside and just being in nature and exploring on my own. That is kind of where I feel the most grounded and the most myself and the most at peace. And I think the way I go about that can change, and the sport obviously has. But I think running specifically has always been that backbone of movement for me. Just like it's so accessible and it can happen despite the elements for the most part. And despite being in like a city in an urban environment or a rural environment, you can kind of do it wherever. And I think because I just love being outside and moving so much, running is just like the sort of happiest and best and most true to me way to go about that, because I just want to get out and I just want to explore. And it's there's such a quick access and easy activation with the sport that obviously, cross country skiing doesn't necessarily have. You have to figure out which skis and what wax and find your poles and find your boots and make sure the ice is out of your boots if you still have S&S bindings and the whole thing.
They're done. No, those
I
are
know,
done.
thank God.
Yeah.
Except for me, I still have S&S, so
Steven does too. It's
yeah.
hilarious. Like I was like, they don't make binding. Like even Solomon stopped using SNS. Like no one uses his binding system anymore.
Yeah. That tells you just how bad it was. The fact that the Solomon Nordic system is no longer used by Solomon.
Yeah. I also just realized how much like boots cost for like the first time in my entire life because I've never bought a pair of ski boots before. And we were in our friend's shop in the Met How, and I was like picking up boots and touching things, and I was like, this carbon cuffed skate boot is $600.
Insane. But yeah, that's the other component with running too, especially as like a college graduate who decided not to ski and had to pay for my own gear, and also pay off student loans and just like figure out life. Running was an amazing mode. But yeah, I think it doesn't feel as much like a transition to me as it probably appears on the outside, because for me, it really just is about the movement and being outside. And running has always just been something I've loved and just gravitated towards. But as you know, Nordic skiing in northern Wisconsin is like, yeah, there's so much snow and it's so cold. You might as well just do that in the winter.
It was a
Who'd go
natural
run?
part. Yeah, exactly. It was a natural part of our existence. And so, in the same way, running is a no-brainer. Although I do remember this is before we had reconnected in the Bay Area. I think you and Steven ran into each other at the climbing gym. And he was like, we should hang out with Olivia. And we are like, okay. And then we moved into your backyard. It was a whole thing. But before that, I'm just like picturing you as this like new college grad in the Bay Area. And I swear we'll like move on to like bigger and better topics. But there's like this story of you like going for a run in the accessibility, right? Going for a run in the Marin Headlands and like getting lost and like not having a headlamp and like drinking water out of a horse trough and then like getting a a horrible parasitic infection because she drank out of a horse trough. It was a whole thing. Like you had to learn some lessons in your professional running career.
So yes, when I first moved to San Francisco, I moved with a duffel bag. I didn't bring skis. I didn't bring a bike. Like I just brought a duffel bag, and I was living in a living room, and I was like, I have no idea how to live in a city. I have no idea how to do this corporate thing, but I do know how to live very simply and minimally. And I also know how to get outside. And so to ground myself and find peace in all the chaos, I just focused on that. And one thing that I had this like big adventure idea, like fairly soon after I moved there, that I needed to go to TAM. But I was like, okay, I don't have really a way of getting there. I'm not going to
She did not. You didn't have
pay.
a car, just
No, I
FYI.
didn't
Like,
have a car. My
had a
first,
duffel
I
bag,
didn't.
no car.
No, yeah, I had no car. I literally just had, I literally just had a duffel bag. And yeah, and the living room I was renting. But yeah, I was like, I have to get over to Mount Tam because I had been on Mount Tam before, and I was like, that place is like where I must be. If I'm going to be in a city, like I need this outlet. I need to just like find peace within all of this like urban setting, and that's one way to do it. But it didn't seem like it'd be that far, and I didn't really have, I didn't, I didn't use like Strava or anything at the time. And it was like cord headphones and like the whole thing still. And so I grabbed a like plastic water bottle and my phone and headphones and just started running. And I had never been in the headlands before, but I had been on Mount Tam. And so I had like a rough idea. And I have a pretty good sense of direction. So I was like, we're just gonna go with this. Also, it's a city. Like, how hard can it be? Like, it's gonna be fun. There's gonna be like so many things.
Totally.
So I also had like my credit card in like a pocket just in case I needed to like actually like pay for a last minute emergency like thing. So anyway, and I had some snacks as well. But yeah, I made it to Tam, was super psyched. The problem was it was dusk when I made it to the top, and I was like, oh no, this is really bad. Maybe I should have started earlier. Um, but it's fine. I have my like phone flashlight, but my phone's, definitely not doing great with battery. So yeah, I started like making my way back. It got dark. Um, Phone died, so therefore no light. And I was out of water and food and for a while, and I just kept going, and I had no idea where I was. Now I'm pretty sure like the most lost I was when I was like kind of around, I think it's the Redwood Trail zone. Yeah, kind of that zone. And then yeah, made it through Tennessee Valley, which at the time was still a dirt lot. But still, it was a parking lot. It looked like a trailhead, and I was like, there is going to be water here. I was horribly desperate.
There
Still to
should be
this
water
day.
there. There should be
There
water
should be
there.
water there.
The horses have
Oh,
priority. It's a whole situation.
yeah, it was okay. So yeah, I still to this day I've never been as dehydrated as I was at that point. I definitely hadn't figured out like the office how to drink and fuel right in the office yet. So I definitely was just like not drinking water and only drinking coffee and just like being that person. So yeah, I was super dehydrated, like hallucinating and like feeling like I was gonna pass out and was like very concerned. Um, yeah, it was not great. So out of like true desperation, I drank out of the horse trough in Tennessee Valley, which I did not know was Tennessee Valley at the time. I did look for water for a very long time, and it was kind of one of those things where I'm like wondering if I probably would have been fine, but because the trailhead was there and I got it in my head, I had optimism. I was like, there's probably going to be water here. And then when there wasn't, I was like, I just need it now because I had told myself I was going to get it. So there's definitely lessons there that I feel like I actually have taken with me since.
I feel like this is people are gonna be like, wow, like this girl ran Norman's 13. This is crazy. But a lot can happen in 5 or 6 years.
Yeah. And I mean, to be fair, I've mapped it out since, and it was like a 60-mile run that I did, like roughly. And I had literally no clue what it would be like or how to like pace or fuel for something like that. I just wanted to go explore. So my intent wasn't like, I need to go for a 60-mile run. My intent was like, I want to get to the top of Tam and back. Because I just want to be outside all day. And then you got to obviously figure out everything else in order to do that sustainably and have a good time and it not be like that. But yeah, so I ended up getting E. coli.
Didn't die. Didn't die.
Shocker. So dumb. I still cannot believe I did this. I cannot believe I'm talking about this right now. But yeah, that's what happened. I am fine. It honestly like wrecked me for like 2 years. I had like really weird gut issues, but that, honestly probably not that weird because it's probably exactly what you'd expect if you do something like that. And yeah, learn my lesson. Don't drink out of horse troughs.
I love it so much. And I just think that it's like so symbolic of like an entry point into sport and also just being like, well, why can't I do this? And it coming full circle to still going on big, sometimes dumb adventures and being outside, not just all day, but sometimes 4 days. So that I think is, I don't know, it's grounding. It's grounding to know that we've all made some questionable decisions in our lives. This is going to sound like a harsh pivot maybe to people, but I think it's important. Like we keep hinting at this Normans thing. We keep hinting at Normans, this big project that you did. I really want to talk about it because I don't feel like people have talked about it enough. TBD. Though you did get a sick shout out in Killian's like year reflection, like not in the main body of the piece, but then he put a comment in where he was like, also so and so, so and so, and Olivia, and I was like, yes. But part of this journey is like this undercurrent of the health journey, a health journey that you're still very much on and will be on for the rest of your life. And that is, you know, it's impacted greatly the last 4 to 5 years of your life in a big way. It's always been there, but it progressed immensely in the last 4 or 5 years. And this goes to you being diagnosed with stage 4 endometriosis and subsequently having a major surgery almost 2 years ago now, right? Are we at the 2-year anniversary?
February 2024. Yeah, so it'd be 2 years as of
almost 2 years.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, right. And so can you just we've talked about endometriosis on the podcast a little bit previously when we've had an OBGYN on, but I'm just curious, like walk us through trying to figure out this like weird all-consuming health thing, because people don't realize, I think they think of endometriosis as like a woman's pain condition and not like the chassis of my body, which is how we run, is completely messed up. And so just like, I don't know, there's no easy way to be like, tell us about your horrific endometriosis journey. But I do think it's a very interesting story. And I think that you have learned so much through the process, though I'm sure you're sick of learning. You've learned a lot about what we do know about endo, what we don't know about endo, and like as an athlete, as a high-level athlete, how you're impacted by this diagnosis.
Yeah. So
where to begin?
Honestly, where to begin? When I was 11 when I got my first period and it didn't stop. It just kept going. And I was in a lot of pain, like tried to put in tampons, couldn't, was like, what's wrong with me? Like all the other girls do this. And I just couldn't. And so my parents had brought me in to see an OBGYN. They basically were just like, oh, it sucks. Like bad periods, you know, like maybe you'll grow out of it. So that was kind of the beginning of it all. And yeah, after the first, I think it was 2 years of having truly periods that would not stop and getting just like super iron deficient, you know, exactly what you'd expect. I finally got a surgery to remove some precancerous cysts from the region. And I got just like, you know, a bladder infection, UTI, the whole thing from there. And so you could say I've been plagued with some issues from the beginning that are likely the beginning of all of this. And so I think, you know, my situation ended up becoming quite severe with the state of my organs and just the severity of the disease across my body. But it's not something that necessarily happens just like overnight. In that regard, just like the scale of disease, it does take some time to propagate, but it also can happen quick too. So it really depends on the person. And this is just my experience. And what I've experienced with this disease in particular is everyone experiences some things differently. And just kind of hearing that, you know, however you feel and whatever your experience is just valid because it's yours is kind of the only key here. There is no like, oh, well, because you experienced this, like, it's probably not that bad, or because it started earlier, then like it's going to be worse than someone else. No, all of that is incorrect. Whatever you're dealing with is just what you're dealing with, and like that is valid. But yeah, anyway, that's kind of how it began for me. And I I think as a response to the original sort of doctor situation was just like, oh, it's fine, I just got a deal. And it just kept getting worse and worse. And I just kept using the Band-Aid approach of birth control. But at the time, I was just using it as like really hormonal medication, which I started right after that original surgery. And so I just was on birth control from then on. And after every couple of years, it would just basically stop working. So I'd get on a new one and then I tried something else. And I felt like I kind of normalized it and was like, okay, well, they say that, it's fine, so it must be fine. But um, I, over the past 5 years, was definitely not fine and I was in a lot of pain. And I was on a trip down in South America and was not going to come back for quite some time, but had to come back early from that because I was in so much pain. I was like, there actually is something very wrong with me. Like I am gaslighting myself and I know it and I need to go see doctor immediately. And so I did. And I think fortunately, and I this is like definitely a blanket statement, it is not necessarily fair, but I think living in San Francisco and having access to just like really big medical institutions and that sort of more research based and like in that more urban setting, just more resources actually allowed me to get a pretty quick diagnosis from there and just having connections within the medical field. But, my experience with rural medicine up to that point, there wasn't a lot of support or help. And so I definitely am grateful that I was in a position to have that access, but it also puts into perspective how messed up it is that not everyone gets that.
But
Um,
I think it's like you're like, I had a quick diagnosis, but at the same time, like it was a
once I,
15-year process. And so it's
yes.
like, it's this idea that like we're
Yeah.
told as women that like, oh, sometimes your periods are just really bad. And sometimes people are just in a lot of pain. And it's normal to be in pain when you get your period. And
Yes. Yes.
that like perpetuates this thing. And then you're also like a frog being boiled slowly in water, where it's like, I remember seeing you pre South America trip. And then I remember seeing you when you came back from South America and being like, I knew that you had some discomfort. I knew you had some symptoms. We weren't really sure what was going on. We were kind of just being like, I guess it's fine. Like it gets worse when I get my period and then it gets better. And we kind of brushed it off at that. But I remember seeing you post South America trip and being like, holy cow, like Olivia is in so much pain. Like it was so evident how bad it was. And so I just think it's interesting that like you're like, yes, I got a quick diagnosis, but only once you were like so symptomatic
Yeah.
that
Yeah. Yeah. And I think also as an athlete, my whole life, I was told that, yeah, you have a high pain tolerance. Like if you're able to do what you do, then things must be fine. But again, that's not necessarily the case. I have learned. And our brains are very powerful and we can push ourselves to do a lot. And I think a lot of other humans going through real suffering show that all the time with their resilience. So yeah, I think if you're feeling, yeah, anyway, I was feeling pain. I didn't understand that I didn't need to be um, in that much pain and that inhibited until I was so inhibited by what I want to do, which was just move outside, that I was like, this is not okay. And then finally advocated for myself. And I was like, I'm going to actually go in there and be like, I need answers now. And I think the learnings, yeah, they were if you feel something, advocate for yourself, but also like find the right doctors and institution who are actually going to listen. And if they continue not to, like try somewhere else if you can. But that is also just like a privilege to try that. And it's hard. And yeah, anyway. Yeah, you're right. It was definitely not like a quick diagnosis, but once I like really pushed for it and was able to find someone who listened, then it all happened pretty quick. And so it ended up being it's a pretty systemic disease for me. And I at the time was really struggling with the approach to take because there is no like standard approach to this. There's only what you think is best for you. And in my experience, doctors definitely focus a lot for me on, especially, in my 20s as a woman. They were like, let's focus on preserving fertility. And I was like, okay, what about also quality of life?
Totally. But
Because
and
they're
you're
not
right.
always one and
Like
the same.
at like a 25, 26-year-old, they're like, well, like we want to give you this option down the road to have biological children. And like maybe for
Hmm.
some people that would work and they would be able to preserve fertility. And for others, and it's like you have this like interesting history of having some weird ovarian stuff since you were like, probably like 8, 9, 10, 11. And so it's like, who knows, right? The cards that you were working with are also like, so again, everyone's experience is so individual, but they leaned in hard to that. And I get that. I see why they did it, but you're right. Like I saw you during that process too of like trying to go through fertility treatments in order to preserve the opportunity to have biological children. And you were in even more pain. Like I remember you in fetal position on a grocery store floor because you had like bumped the shopping basket against your abdomen. Like you were in immense pain because endometriosis is like this disease that grows tissue. Fertility meds love to grow tissue. And so you had to go through this like it had to get so much worse for you before there was a glimmer of it getting better. And I can't imagine how dark that period of time was.
Yeah, it was really hard. And I felt very confused and I didn't really know what I wanted aside from just like wanting to feel better, and just be able to like live my life. And it made me feel at the time like I couldn't do that and I didn't know when I would be able to again. And that was really hard. But I just kept reminding myself that um, like this phase is temporary and I will get through it. But yeah, it was an extremely hard time. And I just, I also as someone who like likes to be a high achiever, I kept seeing these results come back as like failures, like the blood panels and the fertility tests and I went through 2 cycles of IVF and it got, there was they were not successful. And so I was like, I'm a failure is what that was kind of telling me. And obviously, that is not true. But at the time, that's what it felt like because I was seeing those tests as, like I would a test in school, like it's a pass or fail, and I'm failing.
No, but
So
I
that
think
was tough.
athletes, we've trained ourselves, right? Like I was just talking to a friend about this. Like I've got friends and athletes who've had recurrent miscarriages. I myself am like, cool, like probably starting IVF, in the next like 6 months because like we have like undiagnosed infertility issues. And it is crazy because we have trained ourselves our entire freaking lives that if we work hard enough and we put our minds to it, we can do anything. And then you're like, I would like to produce an egg or I would like to get pregnant. And your body's like, nope, so sorry, not for you. And it's like you're quote unquote doing everything right. But you're right. Like it does in the moment in particular feel like you're like, oh, cool, I got an F on this test. Like, how the heck did that happen?
Yeah, which was, with all of the hormonal swings from all of the medications and all of the treatments, it was just a lot at once and a lot of pain. And all of that led into bigger surgery where yeah, it was interesting. It was almost like this weird, like, a la carte setup, which was like, what organs do you want to keep? What organs do you want to get rid of?
Which ones are we taking out?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I was like, this is crazy, kind of cool, like in a way, but also like, I have no idea. And so for me, I just was like, what makes the most sense for me right now? Because I don't know what the future holds with how my body will respond to any of this, but what feels right for me right now is just keeping my options open, which feels like keeping more than what might make sense. And so that's kind of what I chose to do. And so part of that was keeping ovaries that I have since felt like now I'm ready to get rid of, but not to be cavalier
Take
about.
them all. Yeah.
But this is my life now, so well, yeah, just get really over. But yeah, it was confusing and hard, and I was in such a challenging position that also making these really big decisions about like the future of my fertility and my life were like literally I would get knocked out for surgery and wake up with that decision. And that was crazy. But yeah, so that was a tough time. And, after the surgery, you have to wait for all like the tissue biopsies and go through all of that and do like other tests, which is just a whole nother sort of stressful period that you don't really think about because at least I didn't because I was so focused on just like getting the surgery done and getting it out and just moving forward that that part was definitely not one that I anticipated. But it's also difficult to go through. And for me, there was definitely some additional complications that made it a lot more long-winded and a lot more stressful and is definitely interesting. But I do feel like now, 2 years out, having the knowledge to just kind of have a sense of what I need to be looking for and if I feel a certain way, why, has been the biggest benefit to all of it. I now understand like why my body feels the way it does and what's going on and how to respond to it to actually take care of myself instead of being like, why am I in pain? Oh, it's fine. Like pain is like necessary. Like, oh, I'm in pain. I'm not running today because I know it's only going to make it worse and I can do a different activity that's going to be actually more productive because I'm not going to keep pushing on my pelvic floor and creating more inflammation because that's what works for me. And like that's something different for everyone, but that is the outcome for it for me at this stage. But in the midst of all of it, it was very dark. It
Yeah,
was
it
very
was.
dark.
I call it your cancer moment. That's kind of how I've
Yeah.
described it to people and to like that's how I've made sense of it, where it was like it was really dark. Your life was put on pause for a long time and you've made some big changes to like put yourself in the best place possible. You have moved out of San Francisco, you're living in Bishop, you're back in the mountains, you're doing things that make you really, really happy. And while endometriosis will still be a part of your athletic journey moving forward, be it more surgeries or different treatments, etc., you have also, there's like this interesting juxtaposition now leading into Norman's, in which you have been dreaming about Norman's 13 for years. Since we like reconnected in the Bay Area, you were like, I want to go do this thing. And I'm like, I don't know what this is, but tell me more. And at the same time, coming out of this surgery, you have recognized as well that like you can move all day long. You can move for multiple days on end, but moving at certain speeds feel better than other speeds at times. And like recovering from the surgery also meant that like you can hike like a boss. You can, be on your feet the whole time. But like, yeah, bombing a downhill might not feel great. So you've got this like interesting like project that you've been scheming and dreaming of for years. And you've got a body that is currently like definitely way more capable and suited to this type of effort over, going and running a really fast 5K or like a super cruiser 50K. Like you need the slow and the hard right now. And I love that that came together in Norman's, but to set the stage, because people are gonna be like, Nolan's 14, I thought. No, no, no. Different things. So
Yeah.
like what is Norman's 13 and when did you first hear about it?
So Norman's 13 is a link up of all of the California Sierra 14ers. So there are 15 14ers in the state, and Norman's 13 is a link up of the 13 in the specific Sierra range. So the other two that are not included are White Mountain, which is across the Owens River Valley, and Mount Shasta, which is way up north in the southern terminus of the Cascade Volcanic Belt. So basically, I heard about it through wanting to just do a link up of like some kind of like climbing runny thing in the Sierra. And I was like, maybe I have to come up with something myself. And then I found that this actually already existed and was like, that thing already exists. That's so cool. I got to do that someday. And yeah, I found it through researching, something to do in the Sierra like that. And I kind of thought maybe I would just come up with my own like circuit to just go do, and it ended up being Norman's 13. That Andy Golich it's his brainchild. He came up with it, and it's such a brilliant idea. I don't think I would have been able to cope with something as cool as what he came up with. So he should get a lot of kudos for that because it's such a sick idea. But yeah, I had in my head I really wanted to do it, and then it was something I was like planning on doing, like kind of right around when the health stuff all blew up. I was like, oh yeah, I'll just go like do that as like a project next year. And then all of my house stuff unfolded where I was fully taken out from really doing much of anything for quite some time. And I could not stop thinking about it. It became this like obsession and compass during the midst of, all of those health things. I was just like, if I can even just like get out to one of those trailheads again, I will be so happy. Um, and so, yeah, it became so much bigger for me than just like going and doing it. And obviously, it's like a big route in and of itself, but in a way, I feel like going through all of that really put into perspective what a route like that can really mean and really is. And I feel like maybe I wouldn't have given it as much appreciation if I hadn't gone through all of this. And so, yeah, I feel like that was a really big lesson in a lot of ways. I just was so grateful for the opportunity to try in a way that I haven't felt before. Um, I feel like I've spent most of my life just always getting to try, and it was like the opportunity to win that mattered. You know, I feel like
Yeah.
I gotta win. But now I'm like at that point, and still, honestly, I'm just like, I just want to be able to try and experience these things. And I genuinely am not attached to an outcome. I just want the experience and to be in that position. And I really just want to follow that. And I think that's a really beautiful thing to come of something that really sucked.
Yeah, it's like I get to do the thing, and that like can be a guiding light moving forward. What are the stats on Normans?
So because it's an open route, you can kind of figure out your best line, but it's roughly 105 miles. The way I did it was 105 miles and 40,000 feet of vert. Um, Based on the route metrics, could be plus or minus a couple miles, plus or minus like a couple thousand feet of vert, but yeah, it's kind of within that range. So 105 miles, 40,000 feet is kind of a good way of
Yeah.
framing it.
No, but I think that's what makes it really special. And we're going to define this kind of like open route idea because you actually did it in the opposite direction of the men who had done it because no woman had done it before you, or at least hadn't finished it. I don't know if someone's attempted it, but no, there's no woman's time on the route. And the men all went in the opposite direction. And so, one, we're going to talk about why maybe you went the direction you did. But two, that's interesting because it's like you have nothing to compare it to because no one's gone that direction. And then I guess, what makes Normans so special is that one, it isn't a trail. There's a lot of off trail. There's a lot of overlanding and scrambling. But it also makes it really unique because you have to source information and spend time on the route. So tell us a little bit about like what makes Normans special in that regard, because I think that's very different than maybe most, not all, but many FKTs and any trail running.
Yeah, I would say the thing that makes Norman special is you can't just be a trail runner and you can't just be a rock climber. You have to be able to um you have to be able to have the right head for moving in really exposed terrain for a very long time without gear, as well as the endurance and the ability to like move quickly through trail type terrain without getting so fatigued that you have to stop. So it's interesting in that way because you kind of have to have both in order to do it. And what I think really is special about the route that Andy came up with, which is why I like to make the point that I don't know if I could have come up with something like that myself because it's so brilliant, is that it combines the sort of gem aspects of the Sierra, which is this pristine granite for rock climbing, the just like beautiful, solid, not chossy rock and knife edge ridge lines that can come of it, as well as the seas of talus that also our classic. And the JMT, Miles on the John Deere Trail. It combines all of those things, and you get the high alpine moments, and you get the summits, and you get the deep valleys and the rivers and the lakes. It literally goes through Ray Lakes. Like, you get everything in this route, that I think is what makes the Sierra so incredible. And really, the only thing it's missing as far as like the sort of bigger alpine objectives is concerned is that like glacier travel and ice and mixed climbing component. Like, you're generally not getting that unless you do it in the winter or something, but still you're not getting glacier travel in the Sierra. But it's really cool in that way. You get a lot of it outside of that.
Did you fuel your inner rock nerd?
Yeah, so much. I was like, where are the crystals?
For
Where are the
remember, Olivia
crystals?
Olivia did study rocks basically for her undergraduate degree because she likes nature. So she got a lot of rock time and still likes rocks, which I think is really, really important. I guess what made it special being the first woman to establish a time on it? Because it's like that's really the unknown. And then again, I also want to touch specifically on like your choice to do it in the opposite direction than the people who had completed it before you.
Yeah, I honestly, my dream was to find another woman to do it with. I thought that would be so much fun. But just with the timing of it all and just everything, it ended up being really difficult to do. And so I was like, yeah, I'm just gonna go do this as an experience that I want. And
But you also couldn't
um,
find any singular dude that could do the whole thing with you. Like
that
you were going to break them all. So that was also very special.
yeah, yeah. But yeah, I guess for me, it was more just about doing it and less about being like, oh, I get to be the first woman. Though that is definitely a first time, at least in my understanding, that I've ever done something as like the first person to do it. So that does feel pretty cool. Like, I really appreciate that maybe my time and the just fact that I did it can be an inspiration for other super badass women to go and crush it, because I know that that time can get brought down so much. And I just like really hope that someone goes out and just like rages and does it, because I know it's possible. And so if if I'm an influencing factor in any way for other women to go out and do it, that is really cool. And so I guess that's kind of what means the most to me about being the first, is maybe having a little bit of that influence. But I think that's also the cool thing about being the first to do something, is it doesn't even matter that it was me. It just matters that someone did it. And so if that's me, cool. But yeah, I don't know. That's, I guess, kind of how I feel about that. Oh, and I guess the reason why I went the other direction, a lot of the other guys, they were kind of thinking, or did do the full California 14ers as a part of the project, because it, in many ways, doing Normans is kind of the best way to also get the California 14ers FKT. It's just a really quick and efficient way to do it. Quick is all relative. But I in projecting like different segments of the route, I've spent a lot of time out there. I just really like the flow of going north to south, because the way the Palisade Traverse, that the flow of that Thunderbolt to Sill and that whole section goes, there is one chimney around like the U notch that it's so much faster for me to just wrap it than try to shimmy up this chossy chimney without being able to place any pro and just feel really insecure. And that alone was like, that's kind of one of the great reasons for me to do it the other direction. And so,
Tired on the JMT, but
and the other part that I know could maybe make my direction slower is there is more vertical gain going the direction I did on the JMT than the other direction. So I don't know about, maybe that makes a difference, but I don't know. I just really like the flow of that. And I also just really liked the idea of doing my favorite section, which is that Palisade Traverse and that technical crux first. It just felt safer. It felt more interesting. It felt like I could be more engaged and part of the like journey and landscape in a section where that really matters, versus doing it at the very end where my brain is like not going to be as acute. And it is the first time I've done a project like that. So I was like, I don't know how I'm going to respond. So if I'm like totally delulu out there and I'm doing the crux at the end, like maybe I shouldn't do that just in case. So also just like, yeah, mitigating risk, which I now know I feel incredibly comfortable in that terrain. And I was definitely being overly cautious in that way. But lastly, there is something about the just vibe and energy of Cottonwood Lakes area where I ended that is like, it feels so comforting and welcoming. And I have always felt that going into that zone. And so there's something that I felt like was really going to draw me to just like get there. And I feel that in a lot of parts of the Sierra, but there's just something about like that particular spot where I was like, if I get to end down there, like that's pretty cool. And I got to, sleep in my own bed and wake up and go start because I started on the trailhead that's like out of Bishop. So it's also kind of nice.
That is a added benefit. How long were you out there? I mean, I watched your dot for a long time. Kaylee Blevins and I were refreshing things like psychopaths and like texting Matt and texting Kim, and we were insane. And then your like tracker would stop working, and we're like, panicking. So, it was a whole. I experienced Norman's viscerally on my end as well. But what was the total accumulative time, start to finish?
3 days, 17 hours, and some number of minutes that I don't remember.
We won't hold that. We won't hold you to it, I guess. I mean, so it's hard to do a play-by-play of like almost 4 days of movement. And so I'm curious, just like if there's anything that surprised you about being out there, or if you had any specific highs or lows. I mean, I know it was cold. I know your stomach, your tum-tum was not happy, but you had an amazing support system. So like, what were the highs and lows, and if anything surprised you about the whole journey?
Yeah, so honestly, I was pretty set for a while on doing it unsupported because I just wanted to go out and have it be my experience. And then it quickly became like, there's so many people that have been such a big part of this idea and me talking about it and planning it. Let's just make it like a sort of just bigger thing, and just like anyone who wants to come, like come by. And it was, I don't know if I'll ever have the opportunity, and if I do, great, but to have had the opportunity to experience my favorite place in the world with some of my favorite people, all meeting me at different points along the way, whether it be the start, the finish, during, whatever, was truly insane. To just like be way the heck out there and just like also be a part of the community and the people. That really resonated with me and it was really special. I feel like it just made me, it really just like kind of put into perspective, how much these people really have meant to me, and over the past few years of just needing a lot of support going through all the health stuff. And so in a way, it just like, it felt like a coming together of all of that, which was really amazing. And I got emotional out there so much. I was just like, I can't believe this. Like, oh, which is so funny.
And you made them work. They had big long days making it happen out there. I was thinking about, I got to have you out there during Tahoe Rim Trail, and it's like, it is super special, but you guys had it easy. I didn't make you guys, ruck 20 extra miles to get in and out to see me. You guys got to drive to trailheads.
I know. But yeah, I feel like it really surprised me how much, having people around was a huge component to it. I'm just so used to like being way the heck out in the Sierra on my own, maybe with one other person, or just kind of like doing my thing, that I was like, that's the experience for this. And I'm like, that was actually really cool. I'm glad I did it that way. I do think that a really cool style for it, though, is going unsupported. I think because the access is so freaking hard for this route, a really cool style is just doing it with your stuff and like maybe self-supported and setting up some caches and whatever. But yeah, that it actually really surprised me. And gosh, I guess it also surprised me how quickly I did like the first day, but in many ways, I think that kind of bit me in the butt a little bit because I wasn't focused on the feeling. I had never done a multi-day thing like this, so I was like, oh, I'll just, like send it. And I should have focused more on like really dialing in feeling, but it was also hard. It was really cold, like unseasonably cold, and like all the Tarn lakes were just fully frozen over, which was insane. And it was crazy windy, but I did choose that weather window. Like I had a choice and I chose it because I watching like all the prevailing weather systems knew that there would be absolutely no smoke with basically 100% certainty because of the prevailing wind system and the strength of the prevailing wind at the time. And so for me, because it was during a time where there was smoke and fires nearby, it was more important to me to save my lungs and just know that I wasn't going to have smoke and deal with the other conditions than look for like the perfect window. So like, whatever, it's never going to be perfect. So I know that I'll be fine in the wind. It's honestly better than being wet and trying to scramble over the like potential snow or rain. Enter Killian choosing to do that anyway.
Yeah.
Crazy, so impressive. But yeah, so that was yeah, I don't know. I don't know what tangent I'm on right now, but
No, it's great. It's great. And we won't go down too many wormholes. I do have two final questions for you before I let you go for the evening, assuming all of our files upload and my bosses don't yell at us. Okay, so I read the outside piece that came out. It was really cool that you had an outside piece post Norman's. It was beautiful because they did it in a way where it allowed it to be in first person, which I think was very special. And there's a quote at the end or near the end that says, "Normally when I finish a big objective, I'm elated. But here I felt a surreal and overwhelming sense of nostalgia. Not nostalgia for the experience, but for the dream that came before it. Because before I knew this route existed, I'd always hoped to do something like it." And so I'm curious about nostalgia and the dream of the unknown and how this experience is going to shape you moving forward when it comes to dreams and pursuing big, scary goals.
yeah, I feel like for me, because so much of it ended up being about really and truly the process and the journey and the just act of doing Norman's 13, not finishing it, not being like I completed it, I did it, but literally doing it was so it was like the driving factor in so many ways. And now that I did it and I have that experience and I have that confidence to know that so many things in my life do not need to be set up or perfect, or like my health doesn't need to be perfect, my training doesn't need to be perfect, the weather doesn't need to be perfect. Um, but I can just like go and try and do it anyway because if I want to, that's enough. That really resonated with me. And I think the nostalgia specifically with Norman's was just how much of a compass it was for me for so many years through a really hard time to have been able to just like look back and be like immediately and be like, wow, like I did that. And that anticipation and that dream, that real motivating component to all of this is now gone. What's going to fill that void? And I think that was a part of where that like bittersweet nostalgia feeling was coming from, was like I did it, which meant there was like this shift in what I was going to be like thinking about and focusing on next, which is beautiful and great and a point of a lot of growth. Like instead, now I am coming up with my own dreams and my own sort of things to focus on that don't necessarily need to become this like multi-year thing because I'm dealing with health stuff. But hopefully I can just go like try them out and see what happens. And that will be enough in a way that I didn't necessarily understand before.
I love that. That's incredibly special. And I can't wait to see what you do next. I end every interview with the same question, and that is, what is something you know now that you wish you could tell your younger self? And maybe for you, that's the middle school skier trying to keep up with the bigger kids. Maybe that's you in 2021 or 2022. Like what do you know now coming out of this past year, coming out of Norman's, that you wish you could tell your younger self?
Oh, you've been prepped me for
It's
this,
a
but
lot.
I think honestly, I think there was for most of my life, just like I definitely had a high focus on like I must be dealing with certainty. Like I would force certainty. And I think I would tell her, my young self now, that I can just move forward with curiosity and that's enough. Things don't have to be certain for it to be okay to move forward. And outcomes definitely matter less than how you listen to yourself along the way. And yeah, I think that's what I'd probably tell my younger self.
Yeah, and we can be happy not going to Milan.
Yeah,
We live in our
we can be
own trailer
happy with
parks.
that.
Yeah, we're fine. We're fine. We can watch it from our couches.
It's pretty
Um,
great. Some
Olivia,
brownies.
yeah. Oh, I'm coming. I'm coming to Bishop. Thank you so much for joining me today. This was amazing.
Thank you.
I could have stayed and chatted with Olivia for a lot longer. In fact, we hit pause and done on the record button and then caught up for another 30 minutes, some of which was very juicy. So maybe we'll get her back on the podcast soon in the future to catch up on some more things. But I hope you enjoyed that hour that we got to spend with Olivia today. I want to thank Rabbit again for being our official apparel partner and the presenting sponsor of this episode. You can go over to runningrabbit.com and use the code Trail Society Jan for the month of January to receive 10% off your order. Again, that's Trail Society Jan. A huge thank you and shout out to our producing partners over at Feisty Media. Give them a follow over on Instagram at feisty_media and go over to their website, feisty.co, to see what they've got cooking up. Have a snack. We'll catch you next week, or until then, we'll see you out in the trail.